James here with the Oracle Outlook for the week starting September the 28th, 2020. Thanks so much for tuning in and joining me for this week's video reading. I am so happy to have you here. This week I had a request to work with my latest Oracle card deck, which is Neophyte. You may be coming to this video after checking out my deck walkthrough. So in that span of time that I was filming the video, I got a request from someone on Instagram who asked me if I would be willing to work with the deck for this week's video reading, because I've been sharing cards not only on Instagram but in various places that I hang out in social media world. So that is going to be the deck that I'm working with, and I'm so excited because this gives me an opportunity to bond with the deck more. Now that I've had it printed into a physical copy, I am looking for all sorts of ways to work with the deck, and so this is a perfect opportunity. So I want to thank the viewer who asked me to work with the deck this week. So once again, I am working with my personal deck, Neophyte, and now that I've set things up, let's get to the table and see what Neophyte wants to share with us about the week ahead. And here we are with the cards on the table, and I'm going to take a few moments to shuffle the deck. And just as I do for each of these general readings, I'm shuffling my intention into the deck, and that is for the information, for the insight, for the guidance and advice that is going to be most helpful and beneficial. To come through the cards. Regarding the upcoming week. So I'm feeling one more time will be good. All right. And now I'm going to go ahead and cut the deck. And fan the cards out. And now I'm looking for 5 cards in the fan that are getting my attention, because I'm still working with a line of 5. Okay, so I have 2 here, so I'm going to do 4 and 5. Alright, so those are the 5 cards. I'm going to take the remainder of the deck up. I'm going to put that to one side. Alright, now I'm just going to line them up in the order that they were selected. All right. And so when I work with my Oracle card decks and I do a line of 5, I approach it differently than when I'm working with, say, Lenormand or Kipper or Gypsy cards. So in those systems, or when I work with those systems, I should say, I typically start with the middle card. But I'm going to start with the card on the left. So the card on the left opening the line up is going to represent, I call it the origin card. So this could represent a possible situation or scenario that's unfolding. Or it could be, if we're asking a specific question, this would be the reason why the question is being asked. Okay, so we can look at that one or 2 ways. So taking a look at the card, we have Beacon. Okay, so Beacon is a card for me that can represent light, because here we have the image of a lighthouse. And it could just be about navigation, because lighthouses shine a light so that ships on the sea can be guided or have a sense of where they're going, right? The direction that they're moving in. So this could be about a beacon shining light on a situation. And what I love about the image is that in the background, and I'll hold the card closer to the camera, in the background there's a city. right? So this could just be, I'm looking at it in terms of maybe context, illumination, or being a guiding light or a beacon for a particular town or city, right? And it could also be because a lighthouse can be a place where one seeks solitude, because I'm thinking about a person who actually lives in a lighthouse or, operates from the lighthouse, right? So it could be because of the tower structure on the card, or in the building being a tower-like structure. It could represent, isolation. It could be a state of withdrawing from the city, and so that could be metaphorical about pulling away from the busyness of life for those of us who are experiencing that. Taking some time out, getting away. But it could also be about navigating through something that's taking place in a particular town or city. And the light would be about enlightenment. So that's what I'm seeing with this card in the moment. The other cards may inform me more about this, but that's what's coming to me in the moment. Beacon is a card about a guiding light. So it could be about, seeking guidance, seeking illumination, seeking enlightenment. And it may be that enlightenment comes when we pull away a little bit from the busyness of our lives. So that's what I'm seeing with Beacon. Okay, so now the next card would tell us something about what our expectations are. So, we all have expectations about our lives, and our expectations can be a daily thing, like what we expect for a particular day. This card may reflect what the expectations are for the week ahead, or in just a more general sense, what we are expecting. If this is about, seeking wisdom and enlightenment and guidance about how to navigate through life at this time, then this may be what do we expect as a result of that guidance or that process. So here we have bottled up. So bottled up is a card that can represent some kind of challenge, because symbolically bottles can represent containment. And if we look at the image, the bottle has water in it. So this is about emotional containment, keeping our feelings bottled up, right? And so that may be a very unhealthy thing to do in some cases. In some cases, we do need to put a lid on our feelings, but in some cases, bottling up our feelings, our emotions, can be detrimental, right? And then we have in the bottle, along with the water, we have a killer whale. So killer whale symbolically for me, and this is maybe a little bit out there for some people, but this can represent channeling. If we go with the idea that the water can also represent, besides our emotions, can represent our spirituality. For me, water can symbolically represent life, emotions, and spirituality. So I tend to read more symbolically into the imagery, because this is a dream oracle deck, and so I interpret the cards much in the way as if I were experiencing them as a dream, right? So it may be that someone is bottling up either their emotions or putting a container around their spiritual ability, right? And the spiritual ability in this particular case would be channeling, because of the killer whale. And the reason why is because killer whales can breathe both in water and out of water. So that represents the two worlds, spiritual world and the material world. Now I will say, as I'm looking at the image, I'm looking at the background, and it looks like, kind of arid, deserty type landscape. And so for me, one of the things that's coming through is that someone needs to keep themselves hydrated, because I'm seeing hydration here. So there's something about dehydration and maintaining a state of hydration. But for the person who's, maybe bottling up their spiritual life, this card is suggesting that how can you incorporate your spirituality into every aspect of your life, right? That would be the background or the landscape. It makes me feel like somebody may be compartmentalizing their spiritual life. But my first impulse was to go with bottling up our feelings or emotions. And so how can you express what it is that you are feeling on an emotional level without, maybe the possibility of blowing up or tearing into people. I'm thinking about the killer whale again. Right, so that's bottled up. Right, so now the next card typically could represent the heart of the matter or the central issue or the focus. I tend to look at this as an influence, so we can look at that in that way too. It would be an influence that we're not fully aware of. Here we have a whole new world. So the first thing with the whole new world card is I look at the zebra first, right? So here we have a zebra, and zebras are black and white or have black and white stripes. So this is about seeing a situation from a black and white perspective, right? And it may be suggesting that the situation that we are looking at, or the zebra being on top of the world, looking at the world in black and white terms. And it may be suggesting to you that life is not that simple or simplistic. It's not black and white, right? But it could also be too that if we are willing to, I'm going to put the card down for a moment because I'm going to refer to the card that came before it. If we are willing to release pent up, bottled up feelings or emotions, it may be allowing us to step into a whole new world, a world that's new to us. That's what I'm feeling. Like, this card is about containment. So it's about like letting out what we've been containing. And that could just be a whole new world to us in terms of presentation. Like a whole new world opens to us as a result of that. So now what I'm noticing here is we have light in the background here and we have light here. So I look for repeating imagery. So this is a week where enlightenment, illumination, clarity is going to be important. I'm looking at this card and it's making me feel like looking at the bigger picture. So there may be a need to step back. Remember, here we had the city and then the lighthouse. Step back so we can see the situation from a different perspective or vantage point. That would be the lighthouse and the zebra on top of the sphere. Because it makes me feel like we may be trying to look at a situation in black and white terms, and the situation is not that simple. It may be more complex. That expression that there's shades of gray. So it's not entirely black, it's not entirely white. But the meaning of this card for me is about, a whole new world, stepping into a whole new world, or a whole new world opens up to you. And both these cards sharing the same kind of meaning. Here we have the challenge. So this is the challenge that's keeping us from getting from here to here. All right, so now let's take a look at what's on the other side of a whole new world. And this card in this position is guidance. And so when I work with tarot or oracle cards, I'm a big believer in that you're not being told what to do. It's not like you should do this, you shouldn't do that. It's about, would you be willing to consider taking this advice or guidance? And the card is a bird in hand. Okay, so here we have a bird in hand. And so two things. This is the card for me that can represent abundance, but it's also a card that can represent the process of letting go, because the hand is open, right? So the open hand represents receptivity, right? But in this particular case, I'm looking at the image and it looks like the bird is coming out of the hand. It's flying, right? So the bird symbolically can represent an idea or a goal. But it can also be about being open to not being as attached to the goal, and allowing maybe something more or something greater to happen as well. I was telling somebody the other day about, as people, we get attached to particular outcomes in situations, right? And so very funny how we have our expectation card is bottled up, right? So we get attached to a particular outcome, and sometimes because of the attachment, it keeps us from being open and receptive to maybe an outcome or a scenario that would be much better, like grander or better than we could imagine in the moment, because we are so fixated on a particular attachment, right? So That's what this card is saying to me. It's making me feel like, would we be willing to relax our grip a little bit on what we expect to have happen and see what emerges, right? The other thing about this card for me is I tend to look at the bird symbolically like the phoenix. So like it makes me feel like rising from the ashes or regeneration. It could also be about, achieving some kind of liberation or freedom because the bird is in flight. It's spreading its wings and it's flying. So it could be something that's taking off or our own sense of liberation. And I like the fact that it mirrors bottled up and comes after it in order of the cards. So what will we be willing to do to gain a greater sense of liberation or freedom in our lives? Right, and that's metaphorical. That may be the thing that we have to kind of step back, beacon, and seek some time out, some time alone to come to that place, that awareness. So that's what I'm seeing with the bird in hand. So first, it can represent abundance because I think about the expression that a bird in a hand is worth more than two in the bush, right? So it can be about retention and holding on to what we have, but also to not holding on so tightly that we don't allow something better than what we have to come into our lives. But this card is also about freeing ourselves up, a sense of liberation, rising from the ashes, right? And we have a hand in that. The hand represents activity, so we have a hand in that. And so what would we be willing to do in that sense of gaining liberation and freedom, right? So that's a bird in the hand. So let's take a look at the last card, rounding out the line for this week. And here we have the Happy Squirrel card. Okay, so the Happy Squirrel card is an inside joke card, and the inside joke is that it's a reference to an episode of The Simpsons where Lisa was having her cards read, and the reader pulled out the Happy Squirrel card, right? So the Happy Squirrel card can be, since I said it's an inside joke, it's about, maybe the idea about bringing more levity, lightness, right? Levity, more levity in our lives, right? It could be that, maybe the sense of constriction is that we are all business. Remember the city on the back of the card here in Beacon? Maybe we're all business. And this card is saying, how can we lighten up, right? Maybe, how can we laugh? If I said this card was a joke card, right? Jokes usually are something that we can laugh at. So how can we laugh about our situation, right? And maybe not be so serious about it, right? But then the squirrel can also represent, preparation. Squirrels gather nuts to store for the change in seasons, right? So this could just be, what do we need to do to prepare for the season that's coming? What do we need to gather, right? That would be about activity. What do we need to gather? What do we need to store? What do we need to put away? And that could be for the change in seasons, right? Right now we're moving away from summer and into fall, but it could be in preparation for the next season, which is winter. Right? So on that note, I will go ahead and wrap up this week's Oracle Outlook reading. I am James Himm Mitchell, and I'd like to thank you for sharing space here with me for this week's reading, and I look forward to sharing the same space with you again in our next video reading together. So until then, I'm hoping that you are having the best of days, and I'm hoping that you're having the best of weeks. Take care.